Hello, I'm Daniel Franklin, Executive Editor at The Economist, and welcome to this event, The Circular Carbon Economy, Managing Carbon Holistically, hosted by the Saudi Industrial Development Fund and programmed by The Economist. Now, reducing greenhouse gas emissions is one of the biggest challenges that the world faces, and it's a very prominent challenge today for businesses and for governments. It requires a lot of investment, a lot of innovation, and it's by no means certain that enough is going to be done to meet the global targets that have been set for reducing carbon emissions and for getting to a world which doesn't heat up to an even more dangerous degree than it has already. Today, we're going to explore how a transition to net zero emissions can be supported by a circular carbon economy and a holistic approach to it. That's going to involve delving into what we mean by this, reducing, reusing, recycling, and removing. We're going to try to explore what is actually meant by that and what is needed to make it a reality. What are the barriers to making sure that this happens in a meaningful way? We're going to have a panel session later on the circular carbon economy in manufacturing. We're going to hear about a case study. But first, to introduce this whole topic and to kick us off, we're going to be hearing from His Royal Highness Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman Al Saud, the Minister of Energy of Saudi Arabia. Welcome, and I hope that we're going to try to understand with you better what is meant by the circular carbon economy.
It's always a pleasure. I'm very honored to be invited by our fund here, and certainly The Economist. Daniel, I was just talking to you about how much I've been addicted to The Economist, an addiction that I cannot abandon.
Well, thank you. And we hope that continues, but more to the point, we hope that you can explain to us, first of all now, really to set the topic, to set the subject, what do we really mean by a circular carbon economy? In layman's terms, set this out for us. What is it, and what's a holistic approach to it?
Okay. Well, first of all, as Saudi Arabia, we've been engaged in the entire episode that climate change discussion and negotiation went through, ever since the Rio Earth Summit, and even before that, and preparing for that. So that literature, that era, that period, where we are today, I think the main focal point that everybody is congregating around now is the Paris Agreement, with all its commitments, obligations, and all the subsidiary bodies that have evolved before Paris Agreement and the evolution just after Paris Agreement. It all congregate around certain few elements in a basic way. First, we have to reduce emissions of all greenhouse gases, and we use the word plural as opposed to just only carbon or CO2. There is a differentiated but common responsibility, which is a fair and more egalitarian way of how countries would assume responsibility based on their contribution to the accumulation of these greenhouse gases. And also the principle of national circumstances. There are countries that are truly reliant on hydrocarbon or fossil fuel production. Their economies are not that diversified yet. Their government income is not also diversified. And there are those that are suffering from energy poverty and still are in their early stages of growth and development, and they need that space and span of time for them to accommodate to the commitments and obligations that a global effort to mitigate and reduce emissions would be something that we should allow the forthcoming generations to inherit. So in our endeavor to maintain and commit, execute our commitments as a member, a signee of and a ratifier of the Paris Agreement. As you know, you have that approach of circular economy. So what we did was to just induce the word carbon into that, where, as you have rightly said, it encapsulates 4 different R's, because of our belief that to get to the ambitions of the relevant emission reductions that the world requires and needs, you need to be involved in so many different approaches. There is no one approach that would be a savior alone. It has to come from multifaceted approaches, which with each would be a contributor. The 4 R's, as you have described them, when you talk about reduce, which is the typical thing, go for serious efficiency programs. For example, Saudi Arabia is doing that. Go through a price reform program, which would facilitate that reduction. Go for alternative fuels, moving from fossil fuels like coal to one of renewable and the variety that will also support, or go for even something different, which you've alluded to, the recycling or using, which is how to monetize actually CO2. So instead of CO2 being a burden, no, CO2 or carbon will become a material that you can make use of it, and you could, and there is solid technologies that are existent today, and there is an effort to make more room for more technologies to make use of this CO2, and therefore it would not be a burden to the economy. It would be actually a usable material that will facilitate even growth and economic diversity. And then the 4th, which is remove. Clearly, the world is losing a great deal of things, and you could see it happening in many countries. So revisiting how can we encourage greening and creating more things through the use of even enhancing the current ecosystem for these areas that have been debilitated, or go for something different, which is like mangroves and what have you. More also, as you should go for carbon capture, and if you capture that carbon, you can actually dump it or use your current aquifers as an oil-producing country or gas-producing country, and you could use these aquifers as a depository space for CO2. In fact, you could congregate globally or regionally, where you could create a system of piping that allow this to happen. The technologies that we're working with is even more advanced, of having to use CO2 as a mean to enhance oil recovery or hydrocarbon recovery. This is in a basic, but you could see that it talks about a holistic approach, and that we use all of the above as a set of molecules, and you need to capture these molecules and make use of it. Or sorry.
I think many people would think or would suppose that in this whole question of the carbon economy, Saudi Arabia is part of the problem, not part of the solution. What you're talking about is trying to turn that around. How can you persuade people or show the world that this is really serious? Can you give a sense of what the the sort of benchmarks are, the scale of investment that you see going into this?
You know, in reviewing our work and initiatives for the green initiative that the Crown Prince had, His Highness the Crown Prince had invited people to attend, the Middle East initiative, we've been reviewing and also preparing for just what happened on Friday, the G20 Ministerial, or preparing for COP26. We went through a review about where we stand vis-a-vis the others. The numbers we have can showcase us actually as an exemplary producer of hydrocarbon producer. We stand very tall compared to any country on planet Earth when it comes to emissions of methane, for example. Even CO2. As a country, as one of the largest, if not the second or third largest hydrocarbon producer on planet Earth, there is no way you could compare us with any other country. Even as an oil company, as Aramco, first tier, second tier, if you look at where it stands amongst the international energy or oil companies or oil and gas companies, again, considering the amount of production we are, I don't think we are part of the problem. I think we are actually conceived today as part of the solution. If people or all hydrocarbon producers do exactly what we did somewhere in the 70s, it's not just yesterday, in the 70s, where we captured all of the methane, made better use of it, created 2 industrial cities, which is called Jaweli and Yamba, created this massive petrochemical company, going further downstream into specific product and conversions. All of these had happened in a way where it is actually a win-win situation. You sequestered, you captured the gas, and you made better use of it. So if you look at our numbers, compare us not with I'm talking about Canada, the US, the UK, any other relevant, Russia and what have you, Brazil, Mexico, Venezuela, the rest of OPEC or OPEC plus country. By far, we can stand tall than others. We're in our effort today, we're actually becoming much more proactive by being, as I have promised, and as my government had promised, we shall never like to be part of the problem. We will not actually settle for being part of the solution, where our aspiration is to go for being leading these solutions. And I think we have the capabilities and competence to deliver that with the collaboration of everyone.
Let's look at these solutions, and you outlined what you understand by these various approaches, but presumably they're not all equal or not all at an equal stage of development. So I'd like to get a sense of what, in your mind, are the most promising avenues or technologies in prospect that can deliver the real sort of game-changing impact. Some may be nice to have, good to have, but others presumably have a far greater potential to have impact at scale. So if you could outline the top 1, 2, 3 technologies and approaches that you think are the ones that we should really have front of mind for the next decades, what would they be?
The way we are KPIing ourselves is that we have to deliver on all the 4 R's. So for ourselves, yes, the challenge in reduce is way much easier because you have the technologies, which is renewable, which is efficiency and what have you. And that's why, by convenience, the word leans more on that because of its existent technologies because of the existence of technology. So humanly, people lean to the easier, quick solution. Our approach is that this is not going to be enough. In fact, as the Economist also agreed with us, that actually over-reliance on renewable may actually create additional unforeseen problems when it comes to security of supply of materials that will be used in these technologies. The more challenging element is the reuse and the recycling. And certainly carbon sequestration with enhanced oil recovery is something that is challenging. We are working with others on that. When it comes to recycling, we have been involved in creating technologies, be it Aramco or be it SABIC, where again CO2 will be used and combined with chemicals to be produced. We really believe that these two components are the more challenging elements. Along with the remove, I think this is what we have announced, for example, on the Green Initiative or the Middle East Initiative, is that we will be involved in planting huge amount in the form of billions, or helping others in the Middle East in planting more plants and trees to ensure that we can safeguard the sinks. Sinks, it happens to be, it is cheaper, it's easier and more sustainable, but it needs commitment from everybody, and we're willing to commit ourselves to. Again, so carbon capture and air capture would be probably the most fundamental technologies that we need to work hard with others.
And I wanted to ask you specifically about that, because of course green planting a lot of things is very attractive, but what about the carbon capture and the technologies? What excites you there, or what can you see as being the most promising avenue to pursue? Because it's been there on the horizon for a long time, but it's hard still to do it at scale.
At scale, yes, but you need to. That's why we have the CCLF, which is a forum that brings so many countries, including ourselves, working collaboratively. Now, with this new push on net zero and achieving the targets of Paris Agreement, you need the right ecosystem. You need an ecosystem that enable these technologies to come, which is financing. It has to do with financing. It has to do with standardization. It has to do with financing R&D. It has to do with creating an ecosystem that, if by doing so, you're really accelerating the pressure on everybody to come forth with attending to the most challenging aspect, as you have mentioned, which is how can you bring about CC with a scale sufficient and a spread sufficient to be. But again, it's not going. There is no one solution to this phenomena. You have to look at all of the above, and this is what we are trying to achieve by saying one solution for all of that would not be a fit. And we also should be mindful that it's not just only a CO2. There are other gases that are being emitted. As I said, if every country, hydrocarbon country, can do what we did with methane emission reduction, I think that would be a great contributor too. And again, the technologies are in existence.
The system, as you say, it's a whole system, a holistic system, but it's also what the regulatory environment is. And as we go into the COP happening in just a few months' time, what would you like to see put in place that could smooth the way for greater investment, for greater impetus for these measures? What would be the biggest help in terms of regulation?
The first and most important thing that we have achieved, and we are very grateful for the recognition we've had, was the last G20. This was the first time that we introduced CCC, and it was endorsed. Even last Friday, again, there was a further re-endorsement of CCE. We believe that the more CCE being introduced, and the more people focus on what to do in terms of, we as Saudi Arabia now are working on a regulatory framework that actually would induce circular carbon economy in general and carbon capture specifically, because we really feel that unless if we do all of the above, financing, lower physical treatments, temporary physical treatments, regulatory framework that impose it on manufacturers for capturing. The more we do all of these things, which, by the way, I believe it will be cheaper than some other costly approaches. Because I think we should be also guided by, yes, we wanted to achieve these targets, but I think we owe it to our economies, all of our economies, that we achieve it with the least cost possible that we could achieve it with. There is no need to burden economies with massive choices that simply because some political element was the pusher for it. You know, like getting rid of hydrocarbon just for the sake of getting rid of hydrocarbon. Getting rid of coal just for the sake of getting rid of coal, while we still have unabated coal and we don't have unabated coal. Yes, abated coal, why not? Keeping people alternative and choices is important. Ensuring that you go for consensus building and you are to become inclusive in choices, inclusive of bringing the parties to work with you, be it developed or developing country, or even countries that are suffering from energy poverty, is crucial too, because you would fundamentally prefer to have a say in their choices of energy. As it is today, there are those who are using biomass. Alternatively, with a small international program, you would move these people from their current pattern of consumption to something that would lead to emission reduction, improving their actually health and improving their lot. And who knows, with a bit of advancement, they would be even connected to the world. It's quite a few things, yes. With regard to clean cooking, for example. Again,
very briefly, because we're running out of time. So,
yeah, clean cooking is that 2.6 billion people are suffering from. They are not privileged to have that accessibility. The amount of money that you need to spend to get these 2.6 billion people to be, instead of burning coal or biomass, is minuscule considering how much it would cost to improve those people. Energy poverty, 750 million people are suffering from these two programs. If we can just work with people on them, the amount of money that will be spent on that is incomparable to how much you would elevate in terms of health, well-being, sustainability, and who knows, accessibility to the world.
Well, thank you very much. You've set out the scale of the importance of the challenge, the scale of the challenge. You've given us a very good overview of the whole. Interconnected, I think, is what one really takes away from this sense that everything is related to everything else. You can't tackle one aspect of it just in isolation. So there's a lot to discuss, but we are unfortunately out of time. So I'd like to thank you very much and invite everyone to stay with us as we delve into greater details, as we move on to look at the specific case of circular carbon economy in manufacturing. And to lead the panel discussion on that question, I'll hand over to my colleague, Pat Thacker. And meanwhile, thank you once again, His Royal Highness Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman Al Saud, for this opening scene-setting interview.